dear student. Today is a continuation, part 2 of the chapter that we have discussed last time, chapter number 1, living world. So last time we have talked about metabolism, reproduction and growth. All those represent the character of living. Character of living. So the next topic or the next point that comes under character of living are cellular organization, so when we talk about cellular organization, in the previous class we have learned about how a living can be characterized, how a living can be categorized. So we have learned about all those life processes like reproduction, digestion, cellular metabolism. All these type of processes in a living system occurs because of cell. So cell is we know that cell is the basic unit of life. It is the structural and functional unit of life. So cell represents the basic character that will be necessary for defining a living thing as, or for defining an organism as living thing. Therefore, in cellular organization, the presence of cell itself is a character of living. So presence of cell itself is a character of living. So when we talk about non-living like table, chair, furniture, plastic, bucket, all this non-living, we never talk about cells. So when we talk about cells, it comes under the presence of cell itself is a defining character of living. So cell is very important. And these cells, the cells in living organism can be of different type. So it can be multicellular, unicellular. So different type of cells and different type of shape and sizes are present in the living system when we talk about cells and cellular organization. So in case of multicellular organism, these cells perform different functions. Therefore, we can consider cellular organization as defining features of life form. Therefore, cellular organization is a defining feature of life forms. So when we talk about living organism and all those activity that is carried out by a living organism that occurs in a cells, therefore cellular organization is considered to be a defining features of living thing. So the next and the last important defining character of living, it is the absolute. As we have learned that when we talk about reproduction, animal need not undergo reproduction to be a defining character. But the next is consciousness, which is the a property of a defining property of living. So when we say consciousness is nothing but the ability to sense its surrounding of the thing that is happening around the living organism. So it is the ability to sense its surrounding to the external stimuli that is happening around us. So consciousness is one of the defining property of living. Unlike reproduction and unlike other defining features, consciousness is very absolute. See, for example, we know we have emotions. We know what is hot, what is cold. When you touch a hot surface, you feel hot. So that is the consciousness, the ability to sense our surrounding. So consciousness is ability to sense our surrounding, and it is one of the defining property of living thing. Say for example, this even animal also, when they feel hungry, they try to search for food. And for us, in case if you touch a very naked wire in a circuit, in an electric circuit, you got electric shock, so you pull yourself away from it. So these are an example which shows that you have conscious about your surrounding. And this consciousness or ability to sense its surrounding happen in case of living organism only. So living organisms are able to perform, they are self-conscious, they are able to perform, or they are able to sense the surrounding. And in this, the nervous system and the endocrine system that we have studied in previous year, endocrine and nervous system, they are responsible for us to feel consciousness of our surrounding. So the nervous system and the nervous system and the endocrine systems are responsible for consciousness that is to occur. And see, we have the ability to think. The brain has the ability to think and to understand what is being said to you. So this is also done by the nervous system. We have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So this nervous system are the one which is making us sense our surrounding, any external stimuli. So the characters of living that we have discussed in the previous class are metabolism, reproduction, and growth, right? And then we also discussed about cellular organization and consciousness. So in the conclusion, what we can say, in conclusion, we can say that living organisms are nothing but which have the ability of self-replicating, self-evolving, self-regulating, interacting system capable of responding to external stimuli. So after we study, after we have learned about the character of living organism, the conclusion that when we say what is living, then we can say that living organisms are self-replicating. So when I say self-replicating, means they are able to produce their own offspring, they are able to continue their species, and they are also self-evolving. They keep on evolving, right? Evolving means they are able to evolve from simpler forms to a very higher complex form, evolving, and self-regulating. So they are able to regulate its own metabolism, its own growth, its own development, and interactive system. So living organisms are self-replicating, evolving, that is they are able to produce their offspring, they are able to evolve to a higher or next level, higher or more complex organism, can go up to a higher level, and self-regulating interactive system capable of responding to external stimuli. So if it is a living organism, it should be, or it has to be able to sense its surrounding, have consciousness of its surrounding, what is happening in their surrounding. Is there any fluctuation in the temperature, or is there how your brain functions? Are you able to understand? Are you able to think? Are you able to recognize? Do you have a memory? So all these are comes under responding to external stimuli. So the character, all those character, the organism which possesses all those character comes under living, and this is about living organism. Alright, so in conclusion, we can say living organisms are self-replicating, self-evolving, and self-regulating interactive system capable of responding to external stimuli. Right? So let's talk about the next topic for chapter number 1. The next topic is nomenclature and identification. Nomenclature and identification. So when I say nomenclature, so what is nomenclature? Well, nomenclature is nothing but when we try to name an organism. So when we try to name an organism, nomenclature talks about the process wherein we try to give a name to an organism. So for example, say we have a name for this marker. It is called marker, but in other language, in some other people language, it may be of some name. So other than the pen, in the common language which is spoken in a particular area, it may be another name. In English, it is pen or a marker. Right. So this you know what happen is that when there are numerous names for a particular object, it sometimes creates confusion. Right. So in order to avoid that confusion, what we have done is that we are trying to give a standard form of name to a living organism. So such that a particular organism is known by the same name throughout the world, so that all over the world the particular organism or particular object will have the same name, and it is nothing but nomenclature. So nomenclature can be defined as a process where standardized naming of an organism is done. So when we say nomenclature is nothing but when we try to name an organism in a standardized form, which will have a same name, and it will be recognized by the same name throughout the world. So same name all over the world. So nomenclature is nothing but a process where we try to give a standardized name to an organism so that it will have the same name all over the world. So everyone in a particular when they discuss about that organism, they will have the same name and they will have the same idea, so it will avoid confusion when we discuss about organism. And we know how many organisms are there. There are billions of organisms on this. The variety of organism is very high. So in order to avoid that, we have this nomenclature. And we have another important topic, identification. So what is identification? Well, identification is the process before naming we have to identify an organism. We have to identify whether that organism belongs to the human species or it belongs to the animal species like cow, dog. So first of all, identification is nothing but when we try to describe an organism, where we try to describe an organism correctly. So when we try to describe an organism correctly, we call it as identification. So identification, which will be helpful in nomenclature. So once we are able to identify an organism, then it will be easier for us to give a name or for us to do the process of nomenclature. So identification is nothing but we are trying to describe an organism correctly, so that we will be able to give a name to it, so that there will be no more confusion. So nomenclature is nothing but the process where we try to give a standard name, and identification is when we try to describe an organism correctly. See, there are many people who have been working for identification and for nomenclature. So in order to identify, in order to give a name to an organism, many scientists has worked for a very long time, and we have this naming organization different for plants and animals. So for plants, it is ICBN. So it's International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. So it will give you the this international code for botanical nomenclature are responsible for identification and for naming plants. And ICZN, which stands for International Code for Zoological Nomenclature, they are responsible for animals. So they are responsible for identifying and giving names to animals. So this is International Code for Zoological Nomenclature, and this is International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. So we have for plants and for animal, we have separate department. Animal taxonomists are responsible for giving name for animals and identifying them, and plant taxonomists are responsible for giving names for the plant and identifying the plant. All right, and we all know that there are varieties of life form, both plants and animals, including microorganisms, present in our biosphere or in our planet. So therefore we need a correct identification and we need a correct nomenclature, so that there will be no confusion when we discuss living organism, right? So this is about nomenclature and identification. And let's talk why we need nomenclature and identification. So why do we need nomenclature and identification? We need nomenclature. Why is nomenclature and identification necessary? So when we say that nomenclature and identification are necessary, so that all the organism that is known to the human can be known, so that we will have a clear idea about them. And then why we need to identify them correctly? We need to identify them correctly so that there will be no confusion, so that it will have a same name throughout the whole world. And this is because you are familiar with the word called biodiversity. So biodiversity, bio means living, diversity means different. So in the whole universe, in the whole world, the whole world has a lot of biodiversity. As we know, there are around 1.7 to 1.8 millions of organisms. So in order to learn everything about them, it is quite impossible. But then if we have a standardized form of nomenclature and standardized form of identification, then to study this biodiversity, which the living organism is approximately 1.7 to 1.8 millions, it will become easier. The variety of life form is very high, but if we have a correct way of nomenclature and correct way of identification, then it becomes easy for us to understand the biodiversity. See, why we need to study biodiversity? Because all those organisms, in one or the other way, we all are dependent on each other, we all are related to each other. So there is a complex form of relationship between all the living organisms, including human. So it is very important for us to understand the biodiversity, and this biodiversity is nothing but all those plants, animals, and all those microorganisms present in our biosphere, which is planet Earth. So therefore we need to, in order to understand the close relationship between our dependency on living organisms, other life forms, we need to have a correct way of nomenclature and identification. Let's come to the next part of our chapter, which is nomenclature, and under nomenclature we are going to study binomial nomenclature. So this binomial nomenclature is used by the scientists for a very long time. It was given by Carolus Linnaeus, and he was the one who developed binomial nomenclature. And in this binomial nomenclature, the name of an organism has two components. So the name of an organism will have two components. Number one is a generic name or the genus, alright, and the second part of the name will have specific epithet, which will be the species. So in binomial nomenclature, which is given by Carolus Linnaeus, it says that the name of an organism will have two components. One is a generic name and another is specific epithet. So this specific epithet is a species, and the generic name is nothing but the genus, the name genus of the organism. So this practice was first given by Carolus Linnaeus. He is a biologist, and up to now we are following his naming system. So in case of binomial nomenclature, we are using a naming system using two-word format. So there will be two-word format. And let's take an example in order to understand what is binomial nomenclature. So in case of binomial nomenclature, we have, let's take an example of mango. Mango is a common name in English, alright. So, and Hindi, it has another name. In our modern language also we have another name. But so that all the people all the world will have the same name, the mango is written as Mangifera indica. So the first part is a generic name, and the second part, indica, is a specific epithet, or this is a genus name and this is a species. Alright, so this is the way we represent a scientific name. So this Mangifera indica, which is it becomes the scientific name of the mango. So mango is called Mangifera indica, and this Mangifera indica, the Mangifera will represent genus, as I have already told you, and this indica will represent species. So there are certain laws or certain rules that we have to follow while naming an organism, and that law comes under universal law. So the universal law or the rules of naming an organisms are: we use Latin
therefore we are using a Latin name. Latinized, these names are derived from Latin or they are Latinized. So all the names in the binomial nomenclature are Latinized or they are in Latin, irrespective of their origin. So you have this mango. Mango has an origin in South Asia, so including India. But then, even though it is originated in India, but we are borrowing a name from the European countries, the language that was used to use in European country. So this, irrespective of their origin, without considering their origin, we are going to use the Latin or Latinized word while naming an organism. Alright, so while naming an organism, while giving a scientific name to an organism, we are going to use the Latin or a Latinized word so that it will have the same meaning and it will have the same name throughout the world, all over the world. And this Latin are written in ethnic forms. See, in the case, if you are using a computer or if you are using some sort of technology, then you can write in italics. But then, if you are doing handwriting, what we have to do is that when writing a scientific name, we have to underline it. Alright, we have to underline it because we cannot do it we cannot write in italic form. So therefore, we are going to underline the generic as well as the specific epithet. So what the name should be underlined. That is the second law. And the first word of the genus or the generic name should be capital, and the second component, which denote the specific epithets, can be written in small letter. So it should be the starting word of the specific epithet should be small letter, but in case of genus or generic name, the starting word should be in capital letter. So therefore, when you write mango, it is going to be Mangifera, and you underline it, and then indica. So this is the species name. Species name will start with small letter, and then the genus name will start with capital letter. And so this is the illustration how you are going to write a scientific name. So this is all about binomial nomenclature. There are certain rules. So while writing a scientific name, you have to follow this rule. It should be a Latinized word, a word that is derived from Latin language, and it should be written in italic. In case if you are using a computer or some sort of technology which have the facility to write in italics, then very good. If you are doing a handwriting, if you are doing with handwritten or it is handwritten, it should be generic and a specific name should be separate, and then the genus name should start with a capital letter and specific name with a small letter, and it should be underlined. So this is the way you represent a scientific name. So whenever you write the name of organism in a scientific name, it should be written by following the universal rules of nomenclature. Sometimes what happens, in case if we know that a particular organism is described by a particular biologist or by a particular taxonomist, then you can write the name of the person who described it for the first time. So this Mangifera indica was first described by Carlos Linnaeus. So you can write and it is written like this. Alright, so sometimes this is also represented the person who described the organism or who described the plant for the first time. The name of that person can be written in this way. It indicates that species was. This indication shows that when you have Mangifera indica leaf, it shows that the species of Mangifera was first described by none other than Linnaeus. So this is how you use the binomial nomenclature to give a name to a living organism, to give a scientific name to a living organism. So the next part is So what is classification? See, we have so many variety of living organisms, as I have already told you earlier in the beginning of the chapter as well, that we have many variety of life forms. It is quite impossible for us to know all the living organism. So to know all the living organism, or to understand each and every detail of the organism. So therefore, biologists come up with an idea of classification. Well, so this classification is a process where we group organisms into convenient category based on some easily observable character. So classification is nothing but a process where we try to group organism into convenient category based on some easily observable character. So based on some character which can be seen by our eyes, we are going to group the organism. So classification is a process, and it is necessary. Classification is necessary in order to understand all the living organism. It is necessary to devise classification, and classification is nothing but a process where we try to group organism into convenient category based on some easily observable characters. So for example, when we talk about plants, alright, you will get to understand more about when we say about some easily similar or observable character. When we talk about, let's take an example of plants. So plant, when we say plant, then we have a different type of plants. So you can see plants growing in water, you can see plant growing on land. So you know what happens is that when we talk about plants growing on water, they have similar features, they have similar character, and those plants growing on desert, they also have similar features like their leaves are reduced, instead of leaf they have spines, right? So all those characters can be easily observed or can be easily seen by our naked eyes. So we are going to use all those characters as a basis for classification. So basically, classification is nothing but we are trying to categorize plants or animals by looking at some character which can be easily seen. Understand? So for example, as we know that, let's take an example of dog and cats. We all know that dog and cats, they have 4 legs and they give birth to young one. They are warm-blooded. So this all character of cats and dogs are similar, and they both belongs to the group of organisms which give birth to young one, and which also take care of the young one. They also have mammary glands, that is they feed their young ones with milk produced by their body. So looking at this character, we can say that this cat and dog belongs to a group of organisms or group of animals called the mammals, right? So mammals, they comes under mammals, which likewise when we talk about cats, rice, wheat, or they all have some character which are basically same for each other. So therefore, we have a convenient category now called the taxa, right? So when we say taxa can indicate category at different level. So at different level during the process of classification, taxa are nothing but the similar character or similar categories. So taxa, well taxa is nothing but during the process of classification. When we say about dogs, when we think about dog, we know what dog is. When we think about mammals, then we know what mammals is. So all the category at different level will represent a taxa. So taxa is nothing but the scientific term. It is a scientific term for those categories. So all those categories, when we talk about classification, all those category or observable character that we see in an organism is taxa. So taxa represent the scientific term for these categories, right? So when we try to classify it based on taxa, based on character, all living organisms can be classified into different taxa. So all living organisms can be classified based on different taxa. So this process of classification is called taxonomy. So what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is nothing but the process of classification where it is based on characteristic of all living organisms. So based on different characteristics, all living organisms can be classified into different taxa. So all living organisms can be classified based on characteristic of different taxa is nothing but taxonomy. So taxonomy is a process of classification wherein we can classify all living organisms based on the characteristic of different taxa. So classification based on different taxa is called taxonomy. And what is taxa? Taxa is nothing but the scientific term for those categories. Those categories, when we try to think about dog, we think about dog. When we say mammal, then it's mammal. Then we think about animal, then animal. So animal, mammals, dog, they all have different characters. So that broadly divided character comes under taxa. So the category, the observable category is nothing but, convenient category is nothing but taxa. Taxa is a scientific term for categories.